There was once a man who always walked by the sea. His name was Eamon, and the villagers said he had been born with his heart turned toward the horizon. Ever since he was a boy, he would spend hours watching the mist rise over the cliffs of Clare, listening to the distant echoes of what he believed were ancient voices, whispers drifting from the far side of the ocean. The old people used to say that when the wind blew from the west, the waves carried with them the fragrance of Tir na Nog, the land where no one grows old, where flowers never die, and where time sleeps in the grass. Eamon grew up with that tale running through his blood, though he never went looking for it. His life was simple. He mended nets, walked barefoot across the cold sand, and slept beside the shelter of a humble fire. But on the stillest nights, when the sea lay smooth as glass and the moon rose white above the waters, he felt that something was calling him. It was not a call made of sound, but of stillness, as though the ocean itself were promising him rest. One of those nights, when the stars seemed so low they almost touched the water, Eamon heard a different sound. It was not the breaking of the waves, nor the whistle of the wind. It was a gentle murmur, like a melody played on a harp, so soft it seemed to float across the surface of the sea. He followed the sound to the shore. There, among silver-lit rocks, he found a boat. It had no oars, no sail, no name, only a faint glow, as if the light were rising from within the wood itself. Without thinking, Eamon laid one hand on its edge. The touch was warm, as if the boat were breathing, and in that instant, a quiet voice spoke inside his mind. The path to rest begins where time comes to a halt. Eamon looked around, but there was no one there. Only the moon, the sea, and that silent boat. Then, without knowing why, he stepped inside. The moment he did, the boat began to glide on its own, cutting through the water without a sound. There was no wind, and yet it moved, drawing steadily away from the shore. Eamon felt no fear. His whole body seemed to drift, and his mind filled with a strange peace, almost like sleep. He looked back and saw the lights of his village fade away, like fireflies dying out at dawn. After that, there was only the sea, and the music still sounding somewhere beyond sight. He did not know how long he sailed. It might have been hours, it might have been days. The sky did not change, the sun never appeared, and the moon never disappeared. Until at last, he saw a line of light on the horizon, a shore wrapped in golden mist, with soft hills and trees that looked as though they had been made of crystal. When the boat touched the shore, Eamon stepped out and felt the ground beneath his feet. It was soft, almost like moss. The air smelled of honey and recent rain. In the distance he heard laughter, light as glass bells, and saw figures moving between the trees. Men and women with radiant hair, luminous skin, and eyes that held the reflections of the sky. One of them came toward him. She was a tall woman, with hair so long it seemed to flow like water. She wore a green robe edged with gold, and her smile held something that made him forget the weariness of the journey at once. "You have crossed the waters of time," she said in a voice like music. "Welcome to Tir na Nog, traveler." Eamon lowered his head, unable to answer right away. He had heard the stories, but nothing had prepared him for the serenity of that place. The trees shone as though every leaf held a star within it, and even the wind carried the scent of rest. "I did not mean to come here," he murmured at last. "I only followed a melody." "Melodies are paths," she replied. "Some lead to sorrow, others to love, and a few to repose." She introduced herself as Nuala, guardian of the meadows of dawn. She offered him her hand, and Aemon followed her into the heart of the island. They walked along paths where the grass never withered. There were fountains that sang, white deer drinking from clear water, and petals drifting in the air that never fell. Aemon felt weightless, as though he had left his body behind somewhere far away. "How long have I traveled?" he asked. "There is no time here," Nuala answered. "Day does not chase night, and night does not know day. Whoever arrives rests. Whoever rests remains." Aemon frowned, though not from unease. "And do those who arrive never leave?" Nuala smiled, and in that smile there was something ancient, a sorrow so gentle it barely hurt. To leave would be to return to the burden of the world. Here, everything you love lives without shadow, but some human hearts cannot bear so much stillness. Aemon said nothing. They climbed to a hill where a lake reflected the sky with such perfect clarity that it seemed like another world lying beneath the water. Nuala offered him a crystal cup filled with a golden liquid. "Drink, if you wish to forget the passage of time." Aemon took the cup. It smelled of apples and flowers. He drank slowly and felt a soft warmth spread through his chest, a delicious drowsiness wrapping itself around him. For days, or perhaps for centuries, he lived among the people of Tir na Nog. He danced in the meadows, slept in beds of light, and listened to songs that seemed to rise from the heart of the stars. He never felt hunger, or sleepiness, or exhaustion. His reflection in the lake remained always the same, young, calm, untouched. But at times, in those nights when the silence grew deepest, he thought of the land he had left behind, of the salty breeze, the fire at home, the hands roughened by work, and a longing brushed against him, fleeting as the shadow of a passing cloud. Nuala would watch him in those moments. "Your soul still remembers," she would say with tenderness. "The gift of youth does not erase memory. It only lulls it to sleep." Then Aemon would look at her, his eyes searching for an answer he could never quite find. Until one day he asked to see the sea again. "I want to look upon the waves once more," he said, "only for a moment." Nuala nodded without sadness. "Then you will see what remains when time wakes." Together, they walked to the harbor where the boat had first brought him. The sky was still unchanged, the light still motionless. Aemon climbed aboard, and Nuala sent him off with a touch upon his forehead. "Remember," she whispered, "not every gift is meant to be possessed. Some are meant to be understood." The boat slipped back into the mist. Aemon closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he was facing the coast of Ireland. But the sea was no longer the same. The hills had changed. The stone walls were thick with moss, and the village no longer existed. All that remained were ruins and the echo of the wind. Then Aemon understood that the world had gone on in its course, while he had slept inside eternity. He felt no fear at the sight of the ruins. He walked among the fern-covered walls, brushing his fingers over the cold stone, as if trying to recognize the shape of an old memory within it. The moss seemed to breathe. Between the fallen blocks, small white flowers had bloomed, and the soft smell of damp earth rose from the ground. As the wind passed through the openings, it made a faint sound, almost like a sigh. He sat on what might once have been the threshold of a house. There, he closed his eyes and listened. He could hear the sea, softer than before, and the delicate rustle of insects among the leaves. For a while, He let the time of the earth settle itself around him like a blanket. There were no familiar faces, no voices he could name. But he did not feel lost, only changed, like someone returning to a place he had loved in another century. At last, he rose calmly and began walking along a path that might once have been a road. Stacked stones formed blurred boundaries between the meadows. Beyond a small rise, he saw a solitary tree, a hawthorn bent by the years, dressed in trembling white blossoms. And in that moment, he understood that even here, for a very long time, people had known better than to cut a fairy thorn. The tree was surrounded by faded ribbons, tiny bows, scraps of cloth washed over and over again by the rain, offerings, prayers. Aemon searched his pockets and found nothing, except for a strand of dry grass that had clung to his robe from the meadows of Tir Nanog. He held it for a moment between his fingers. He thought of Nula, of the stillness of the lakes, of the crystal cups, and with great care he tied that pale strand to a low branch beside the weathered ribbons. Then he bowed his head in silence. "Let it keep what it must," he murmured. "Let it return what it must." The day, or whatever those in this new age called day, moved forward without hurry. Aemon crossed rolling hills where the grass was dotted with cotton grass, and he heard the long, mournful cry of curlews. In the distance, a round tower rose alone, like a needle against the pale sky. He made his way toward it slowly. At its base lay fallen stones and a circle of flattened earth, as though people still gathered there at times to light a fire and then leave it to die. Beside the tower, he found a well enclosed by a ring of stone. Someone had left a wooden cup on its edge. The water trembled with the reflection of the sky. Aemon bent down to look at his face and saw the same countenance as ever. No years marked his skin. No weariness lined his brow. The youth of Tir Nanog still clung to him like a veil. He did not drink, not out of mistrust, but because he understood that the water of that well had been meant for other kinds of weariness. He sat nearby, his back against the warm stone, and let the stillness move from the well into his chest. He remained there long enough for the light to shift just slightly, as though a cloud had passed over the face of the sky. "Are you looking for someone?" a gentle voice asked from the edge of the meadow. Aemon turned and saw a middle-aged woman with a dark shawl over her shoulders and a wicker basket resting on her arm. Her hair was tied back, and her eyes held the calm of someone who had watched many seasons pass. She approached without fear, stepping carefully, like one who does not wish to startle a dream. "I do not know," Aemon replied with quiet honesty. "Perhaps I'm looking for the name of what I lost." The woman smiled just faintly. "This is Bridget's well. People come here to pray for the sick, for the lost, for those who cannot sleep. You leave a thread on the tree, walk around 3 times, drink, and tell the earth what hurts you." She studied him with soft curiosity. "The earth does not seem to weigh heavily on you." "It does not," he said, "but at times I miss it." The woman inclined her head as though she accepted the truth of that. "My name is Sorsha. I tend the well and the tower. No one asked me to. It is only that someone ought to." Aemon stood slowly and gave his name, adding nothing more. Sorsha watched him closely, perhaps wondering from what place this man had come, this man with the faint light in his gaze and stillness in his hands. "There is a stone bench beside my cottage," she said. "You should sit there for a while. The road is short, and you need not tell me anything if you do not wish to. For some, silence is more useful than words." They walked together at an unhurried pace. Sorsha's cottage stood near a small grove of birch trees. Its lime-washed walls reflected a soft, steady brightness. There was a small garden with kitchen herbs and simple flowers, lavender, chamomile, and a little sage. The air smelled of fresh bread and the gentle smoke of peat. Sorsha pointed to the bench. Aemon sat down. His hands rested on his knees, open like leaves. She brought him a jug of milk and a piece of warm bread. He accepted them and ate slowly, savoring the humility of the meal. In every crumb there was the warmth of a home. In every sip, the memory of countless mornings. "How long have I been away?" he asked at last without urgency. "I am not the one who can tell you," Sorsha replied. "There are stories, as you know. Time here comes and goes, and sometimes it falls asleep along the shores." She looked at him with a small smile. "The people around here remember a harbor that is no longer there. A village swallowed by the sea, returned by a winter of great waves. And they remember that on strange nights, a boat without oars comes close to the beach, and someone leaves a thread on the tree." Aemon lowered his gaze to his hands. Around his wrist, as though he had only just noticed it, was still tied a small ring of grass. He touched it. It still carried the impossible freshness of Tir na Nog. "There," he said very softly. "Day does not follow night. No one grows old, nothing fades. And still, I wanted to come back, if only to hear the crackle of bread again." He lifted his eyes. "Do you sleep well, Sorsha?" A faint laugh escaped her. "Sometimes, on rainy days, on the days when the well goes quiet, as if content, on the days when everything sounds slow." She gave a little shrug. "Other times, no. I think there are lost dreams that come to peer through my window." "I slept for a very long time," he said, "and I have learned that youth is not a pillow. It is light, yes, and freshness. But it does not shelter you if what you seek is rest." Sorsha listened with the attention of someone drinking from a jug that keeps filling itself. "There is a place," she said after a moment, "where people go to learn how to sleep without fear. It is not far. It lies on an island in the lake. They call it Inis Talam, the island that gazes at the land. No one knows who first gave it that name. In a little stone house there lives an old man with a harp. Travelers say that when he plays, hearts remember the way the world beats in autumn." She smiled very slightly. "No one comes back with grand answers. They only come back lighter." Aemon let the idea settle in his mind like a bird coming to rest on a branch. He did not rush to decide. He stayed there that afternoon with Sorsha, helping her gather herbs, grinding a little oats, listening to the wind in the birches. When the light dimmed, Sorsha lit a lamp and a small fire. Aemon slept on the floor on a blanket, and sleep fell over him like a fine rain. He did not dream of Tir na Nog that night. He dreamed of harp strings, taut and soft, trembling from somewhere far away. It was a slow music, a music that did not wish to take him anywhere, only to hold him the way water holds a leaf. At dawn, Sorsha prepared him a cup of chamomile tea and a piece of bread with honey. Aemon drank and felt the warmth filling his chest. With a simple gesture, Sorsha pointed him toward the path to the lake. She gave him a blanket and a cloth sack filled with bread, cheese, and an apple. Then she tied it to his belt with a knot that was firm and quick. "When you reach the wooden pier," she said, Call your name. If it is meant for you, the boat will come." Aemon thanked her with a slow bow. Then he set out without haste. The path ran along meadows where speckled cows grazed. Swallows skimmed above the water in puddles. The birches, with their pale white bark, creaked sweetly in the breeze. The sky was high and pale, with thin clouds letting through a milk-white light. When he reached the lake, the water lay smooth, only lightly wrinkled by a wind that seemed to come from the heart of the island. There was a pier, indeed, made of old planks, moss growing in the joints. Aemon approached and stopped at the end of it. He looked down at the reflection of his untouched face upon the moving mirror. Then he remembered Sorsha's words and spoke, without raising his voice too much. "Aemon," he said, and the name opened like a tiny flower, sending ripples over the water. "I am Aemon." Nothing happened at once. The lake kept breathing slowly. Then, from the side where the mist lingered, a boat came forward. It was small, made of dark wood. It had oars, but no one moved them. It came to a stop beside the pier with a soft knock, like a heart arriving home. Aemon stepped in. He sat down. He felt no urge to take the oars. The boat drifted away and began gliding toward the center of the lake. The journey was brief, or perhaps long, as journeys are when they are no longer measured in minutes. The water barely touched the hull. Silent gulls crossed the air overhead. The island appeared first as a shadow, then as a body, small and clothed in grass. At its center stood a stone cottage with a thatched roof and a chimney releasing a thin ribbon of smoke. When the boat touched shore, Aemon climbed out. The ground was springy beneath his feet. It smelled of wet grass and clover blossoms. The cottage had a wooden door and a window framed in weathered blue. Aemon knocked softly. No one answered. He pushed the door, and it gave way with a quiet sound. Inside, everything was simple. A wooden table, 2 chairs, a shelf holding clay jars. On the other side, a narrow bed covered with a wool blanket woven in checks. Hanging on one wall was a harp. It was small, a traveler's harp, with strings that looked like amber tears. Beside it rested a walking staff, smooth knotted and worn by a hand over many years. "You have arrived," said a voice from the back door, where a curtain revealed a glimpse of a garden. "You were in no hurry, and that is good." Aemon turned. In the doorway stood an old man. He was neither tall nor short. He wore a pale robe and a shawl over his shoulders. His hair was white, and so was his beard. But there was no frailty in him, only a kind of steadiness. His eyes were the color of gray stones at the edge of the sea. "I am Fergal," the old man said, "and I keep silence now and then, because it is the only thing I know how to keep without dropping it." Aemon smiled, a brief glimmer of a smile that vanished at once, like a candle lit only to greet someone. "They told me that here one learns to sleep. Here one learns to listen to what one still does not dare to say," Fergal corrected him, though gently. "Sleep comes afterward, like a cat that will not come when called. But if you sit very still, it curls up in your lap." Aemon nodded. Fergal motioned for him to sit in one of the chairs. He took the other. He did not ask who Aemon was or where he had come from. He put water on to boil and cut a piece of bread. The old man's hands moved with the calm of one who does things simply for the pleasure of seeing them done. "Do you hear this?" he asked suddenly, and he was not speaking of the pot or the fire. Aemon closed his eyes. He could hear the crackle of metal, the whisper of heating water, the soft tapping of branches against the wall, and beneath that, a finer thread of sound that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. He thought of the harp hanging on the wall. "Yes," he said. "Good." Fergal poured the tea and slid the cup toward him. "Here, we do not tell grand stories. Heavy names do not cross the lake. Here, the knot in the chest loosens, and sometimes when the knot gives way, night comes in. The good night, not the kind that frightens." Eamon drank. The tea tasted of herbs, with a trace of mint and a light, clean bitterness. He felt that his tongue remembered that bitterness from other lives. A welcome weariness settled over his shoulders, like a shawl finally finding the right collarbone. "There," Eamon said, and did not say where. "Everything is young, everything is beautiful, but beauty has no weight, and I began to miss the weight of a blanket, the weight of rain, the weight of bread in the hands." Fergal nodded, unsurprised. "Rest is not weightless," he said. "It is a kindly weight, the sort that tells you, 'Lean here.' You forget that when there is nothing left to hold." He rose, walked over to the harp, and took it down. Resting it on his knees, he closed his eyes and brushed a chord with his fingers. The sound was clear, slow. It spread outward like rings in water. The music that followed was in no hurry to arrive anywhere. Between one note and the next, there was space, a space in which to breathe. Eamon surrendered to those breaths. Every string seemed to touch, with great tenderness, an inner fiber that had not stirred in centuries. Nula's face passed through his mind like a reflection over a lake. It passed, did not linger, and left him at peace. Then he saw the ruins of his village, Brigid's well, the damp ribbons hanging from the fairy thorn. All of that passed too, like clouds. "In Tir na Nog," he said when Fergal let the last note fade away. "I thought the gift was never growing old. Then I thought it was never feeling pain. Then that it was forgetting. Now I do not know." "It may be," the old man answered in a voice barely above a murmur, "that the gift is being able to lie down with your years beside you, like an old dog settling at your feet. That the body should weigh just enough, and the mind as well. That the heart should know the door is open, in case it wishes to close its eyes." Outside, the wind carried the scent of distant rain. Fergal rose, set down the harp, and pulled 2 blankets from a chest, handing them to Eamon. "Go outside for a while," he said. "Sit in the grass. Do not think about sleep. Watch the clouds move over the lake. Watch until the act of seeing itself tires your eyes. When you come back, fill this bowl with water and sit by the fire. Then I will tell you what the island says to those who arrive carrying the light of the place you came from." Eamon took the blankets and stepped out. The grass was cold but kindly. He wrapped himself and lay on his side, one hand tucked beneath his cheek. He watched the clouds, just as Fergal had said. He saw a flock moving high overhead, so high it looked like drifting snow. He pressed his hand a little deeper into the grass and felt its dampness. He closed his eyes for a brief moment. When he opened them again, the world was still there, without harshness. He thought, fleetingly, of the boat that had brought him here, and of the other pale wooden boat that had left him on the shore of Tir na Nog. 2 boats like 2 blinks of an eye. He thought of Nula's words. Not every gift is meant to be possessed. Some are meant to be understood. He took a deep breath. The air filled his chest, and for the first time since his return, He had the feeling that the air was not merely entering him, but staying, settling in, making itself at home. When he stepped back into the cottage, Fergal was seated before the fire with the bowl on the floor. Aemon filled it with water and sat down. The old man waited a moment, as though listening for an invisible signal, and then he spoke unhurriedly. "Those who arrive with your kind of brightness," he said, "carry in their bodies a season that has stopped, as if it were always spring. And yet the human soul was not made for a single climate. It needs summer to open, autumn to let go, winter to become silence, and spring to remember that beginning again is possible. Tir Nanog is indeed a gift. It reminds us of the youth of the world. But true rest does not live in only one season." Aemon looked down into the water in the bowl. Fire danced upon the surface, and the reflection of his face danced too, young and free of lines. "And where does that rest live, then?" Fergal smiled softly. "In a place with no single name. Let us call it peace, to begin with. Peace comes when you stop asking whether you are losing something. It arrives when you stop straining to hold on. It arrives when you sit by the fire and accept that the fire has a language of its own, that sometimes it rises and sometimes it bends, and not because of you, nor against you." He leaned down and touched the surface of the water with his fingertips. "Here we learn that, and we learn how to lay our heads down upon that knowing." Outside it had begun to rain the slightest rain. Soft drops tapped on the thatched roof. The sound was not insistent. It was a lullaby. Fergal took up the harp again. Without realizing it, Aemon leaned slightly forward, as if he were afraid of losing even a single word. The old man smiled from the corner of his mouth. "You may stay if you wish. No one counts the days here. When your body and your soul have found one another again, the lake will carry you back. Or it may leave you upon another shore, one that has no need of names." Aemon closed his eyes. The harp sounded once more. The notes had learned, over the years, to place themselves exactly where they belonged, never pushing. Between one and the next, the silence was like an open field, like a vast meadow where one could lie down without fear of falling off the edges. Beneath it all, the rain marked its own music, and the fire answered in its own way. He did not think of choice. He did not think of the future. He simply let himself remain there. The youth he wore like a cloak no longer troubled him. But he knew now, with a damp and gentle clarity, that when true rest came, he would not mistake it. He leaned back against the wall, wrapped in the blanket, and let his eyelids fall. This time, sleep came with exactly the right weight, like a slender book resting upon the chest. And so he stayed, breathing slowly, in rhythm with a world that at last seemed to beat in a measure he understood. That night on the island was unlike any night Aemon remembered. There was no visible moon, yet the air still glowed, as if every drop of dew held a tiny spark inside it. From his bed, he could hear the lake moving the water with a calm, almost human rhythm, and the low crackle of the fire in the hearth. Outside, an owl called once, and its voice was long and enveloping, a warm shadow stretching itself across the roof. Aemon did not dream of faces or places. He dreamed of a current moving without haste, of a river that led nowhere at all. In that river, the stones were so polished, they looked like mirrors, and in them one could see the face of time itself, always changing, always the same. When he awoke, Fergal was already sitting beside the open door. He held a bowl and was slicing an apple slowly, letting its sweet fragrance mingle with the cool morning air. "You have slept," he said without looking at him. Eamon nodded. "I have slept, like someone learning how to do it again." The old man smiled, almost invisibly. "That is good. Some arrive here and cannot remember how to close their eyes without fearing the world will change while they sleep. You already knew. You had only forgotten." Eamon rose slowly. His movements were light, but no longer hollow. For the first time since his return, he could feel the pleasant weight of his body. The floor beneath his feet was solid, and when he touched the wooden table, he felt its roughness, the simple truth of matter. "Today we will go to the water's edge," Fergal said. "There the lake opens into a clearing, and there is a stone they call the Stone of the Sigh. It is the place where music ends and silence begins." They walked in silence. The path that crossed the island was carpeted with clover. The flowers moved softly in the wind, and the sound of insects filled the air with a rhythmic pulse, almost like a heartbeat. When they reached the water's edge, Eamon saw the stone. It was large and rounded, its surface veined with pale streaks, as if someone had carved the traces of waves into it long ago. They sat upon it. The lake water was so clear that he could see the pebbled bottom below. Fergal spoke in a low voice, as if he did not wish to disturb the place. "They say this stone keeps the voices of those who found repose. It does not hold them. It only turns them into air, and the air gives them back to the world." Eamon passed a hand over the surface. It was warm, alive. "And you, Fergal?" he asked. "Have you found that repose?" The old man looked toward the horizon, where a silver mist was beginning to gather over the water. "It is not something one finds, son. It is something one recognizes. It comes when you understand that rest is not a place, but a disposition, a way of accepting that the current carries you, without fighting it and without ceasing to feel its freshness." The wind shifted, bringing with it the scent of herbs. Fergal lifted his harp and played a slow melody. It was neither joyful nor sorrowful. It was whole. Each note remained suspended in the air for a moment before dissolving, as if searching for its rightful place in the heart of silence. Eamon closed his eyes and let the music wrap around him. For a moment he thought he heard a voice he knew among the notes. Nula's voice, the guardian of the eternal meadows. It was a whisper from far away, warm and serene. "Rest, traveler. Eternity does not dwell where time does not pass. It dwells where the soul stops struggling against its course." Eamon drew in a deep breath. He felt the air move gently through his lungs, felt the sound of water, wind, and harp joining until they formed a single pulse. "I understand now," he said, his voice barely more than a breath. The youth of Tir na Nog was only the doorway. The true gift was being able to close one's eyes without fearing the loss of anything. Fergal stopped playing and nodded. "That is it. Whoever seeks eternal rest will not find it in absence, but in complete presence. In being part of the world without wishing to hold it still." The silence that followed was so full it did not feel empty at all. The lake breathed. The clouds moved slowly, and the sun behind them cast a diffused light that wrapped everything in a gray gold glow. Eamon lay back upon the stone, looking at the sky. He felt that his body and the rock were one, that the same current moving the water was also passing through his blood. For the first time in a very long while, he did not think about returning or staying or what he had lost. There was only that instant, and within it, everything was complete. The days passed, though on that island the days had no names. Fergal taught him how to tend the fire, how to listen to the murmur of roots beneath the earth, how to recognize the sound of dawn before the light arrived. At times, other travelers crossed the lake. They came with tired eyes, with shoulders heavy from long roads. Fergal welcomed them without questions. He offered them bread, silence, and music. Some stayed only for a few hours. Others remained longer. All of them, before leaving, looked at the water with a new calm, as though something inside them had learned to breathe more slowly. Aemon watched them. Sometimes he spoke with them. Other times he only listened. In every face he found a different reflection of himself. There were those who had sought youth, those who had fled pain, those who had wished to forget, and all of them discovered the same truth. True eternity was not found in stopping time, but in making peace with its passing. One afternoon, Fergal handed him the harp. "Now you play." Aemon hesitated. His hands did not know the instrument, but the moment his fingers rested on the strings, a gentle sound rose, almost like a breath. The music was awkward at first, then more fluid. He was not trying to imitate Fergal's playing. He was simply letting the sounds emerge, as though the lake itself was speaking through him. As he played, he felt a warm current run through his chest. It was not magic nor miracle. It was something simpler than that. A deep rest, a quiet born from knowing he needed nothing more. Fergal watched him, satisfied. "You hear it now, don't you?" he said. "Yes," Aemon whispered. "It is as if the world were breathing inside me." That is what remains when desire falls asleep. The old man rose, leaning on his staff. "Soon the lake will show you another path, not the return, but the next step. Eternal rest is not disappearance. It is remaining where the soul can finally rest without pain." Aemon said nothing. He knew the moment was drawing near, but he felt no sadness. The thought of leaving was as gentle as the sound of water against stone. That night, while the fire dimmed, Fergal handed him a small cup carved from dark wood. "Drink. This is not the drink of Tir na nog. It is only water from the lake. But whoever drinks it with a peaceful heart understands what words cannot say." Aemon raised the cup to his lips. The water tasted fresh, with a faint echo of metal and earth. When he swallowed, he felt something in his chest open, like a door closing the other way around. "Thank you," he said, not knowing whether he was speaking to the old man, the lake, or the world itself. Fergal nodded. "Tomorrow, at dawn, the boat will come. You will not know where it is going, and you will not need to know." When the first light settled over the water, Aemon rose. Fergal slept beside the fire. The air smelled of heather and dew. He walked down to the lakeshore. The boat was already there, waiting for him, floating motionless. He turned toward the cottage. "Thank you, Fergal," he whispered. The old man, without opening his eyes, answered, "Go in peace, child of time and dream." Aemon stepped into the boat. It glided gently into the mist. The island faded behind him, dissolving into the light. The water held neither cold nor depth. It was like sailing over a breathing mirror. In the distance, a figure waited upon the opposite shore. It was Nuala. Her golden hair moved like threads of wind. "You have understood, traveler," she said when the boat reached land. The gift of Tir na Nog was never youth. It was the chance to learn rest. Eternal rest does not lie in sleep, but in the serenity that lets one live without fear of passing hours. Eamon looked at her, calm and clear-eyed. Now I know. The eternal does not need to be endless. It only needs to be whole. Nuala nodded. Then rest, Eamon, not in forgetting, but in the quiet memory of the world. She extended her hand. Eamon took it, and a golden radiance surrounded them. There was no pain, no farewell, only a feeling of depth, of complete silence. The lake grew still. At its center, where the mist had opened, a ray of light rose into the sky, and then dissolved. And ever since then, they say that on certain nights, when the wind blows from the west, the air above the lake sings in a faint voice made of harp and breeze, a melody that promises neither youth nor forgetting, but something far sweeter: rest. And whoever hears it with an open heart may feel, if only for a moment, that all the time in the world can fit inside a single peaceful breath.